This is the Working in Hell podcast with your host, Vinny Blasio. Each episode, Vinny takes you inside the world of New York State Corrections, focusing on both corrections officer and law enforcement issues. And now your host, Vinny Blasio.
Hey, hello everyone. This is Vinny Blasio, and I am with you with the Working in Hell podcast. So today we are doing episode 14 for those that are keeping track. So I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. The numbers are increasing on our podcast throughout all the platforms. We're available both on your streaming platforms on Rumble, YouTube, and the audio platforms of your choice for podcast, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, etc. So a lot of ways you can join. I've been getting a lot of emails and feedback, so I always appreciate the feedback that we get, and obviously not only in the polls that we do, but also the messages, online messages and emails. So anyone that wants to reach out, obviously you can reach me at Vinny Blasio at Outlook.com. That's VINNYBLASIO at Outlook.com. And we did have a couple of reporters reach out asking some questions, and some of the stuff was released in a couple of the press releases that we'll get to shortly. So again, thanks for everyone. Want to take a moment to recognize all of our fallen brothers and sisters who have gone on before us. And also let us recognize all the officers that have recently and past, present, and future, unfortunately, that are injured, as these numbers, and we'll get to that in a report, that are just growing tremendously in the wrong direction. And I feel bad for so many people that are getting hurt. And we know that the agency keeps downplaying these injuries, and we'll discuss that in a moment too. It's just disgusting the way that they downplay these injuries. And just spoke to a officer that was injured in last year, or earlier this year, I should say, and he has still not returned to work. Docs labeled that as a no injury category, and the officer will never work again. So that just shows you how they manipulate and play, but most importantly, how they go to disrespect the security staff at great lengths. And there's a lot to get to today, so we'll get that. Also, we've also need to take a moment to recognize the passing of past Superintendent Ron Mozicki. That obituary was put out on my group, at the Vinny News group, for those that follow me on Facebook. Also, the Working in Hell, New York State Correction Officers Working in Hell group as well on Facebook, also available on Twitter and True Social. But Ron, as most know, that he retired. He was a superintendent at Lakeview, held many positions throughout security, came up through the security ranks at Attica. So we want to take a moment to recognize his passing. So with that, I just want to thank you, Mo, for that. We just want to get on to some of the news. We're supposed to have a guest to join us today. Unfortunately, they were not able to join us, but it was going to be a good presentation, I thought, from hearing one. Nobody wants to hear me all the time, so it'd be refreshing to hear from someone else and talk about their resignation. So unfortunately, they are not able to come join us this morning. We'll have them on at a later time, a job interview, so good luck to them for that. But they did want to touch on why they resigned, so they left me some information that they wanted to tell everyone that the mandates and the lack of home life balance was destroying their family and took a toll on their spouse and children. And that was the reason that they resigned. And we hear that a lot with all the mandates, the unprecedented number of assaults that are happening within New York State correctional facilities. It's just overwhelming. And it was destroying their family. It took a toll, like I said, and they had less than 10 years on the job, but they just said, I cannot in good conscience stay anymore. But these were their words. I cannot recommend in good conscience this job to anyone. This department destroys your soul and doesn't care if you live or die. You mean nothing. And although I like the people I worked with, I never felt like the department docs had my back or best interest. I saw people stabbed in the back. Now, it would have been great to hear some examples of that. But it's the same sentiment that I get over and over, whether it be the social media post or people that are just posting it all over. I seen it on the governor's website. I seen it on DOCCS website the other day, their Facebook page, I should say. And these sentiments are growing and growing and growing. And these are people that are retired like myself. These are people that are still involved in the department. And I just can't understand it. But again, appreciate them for getting their message out to me. And the messages keep pouring out, and we'll get to the news now. As I promised, that we'll start the news section of every podcast so we can share some different goings on across the state and the different correctional facilities. And this is just a glimpse from last week. We're going to slow down the podcast a little bit. One, because it's costing me a lot of money. And two, we'll slow it down just a tad as we get to the holiday season and then see what next year brings. So we'll probably do one more podcast, maybe two at the most between now and the end of the year. But let's get on to find the news, and we'll get on to the news of the week. Okay, so for the first one is the Spectrum News put this out, and I believe this was released last Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. This was updated 6:25 a.m. November 15th. And it's by Kate Lisa. This is Spectrum News that put this out. CO's union docs clash on prison violence. The number of reported assaults on prison staff and incarcerated New Yorkers is at an all-time high. According to data from the State Department of Correction and Community Supervision, prison violence has increased over the last 5 years, and the State Correction Officers Union wants the state legislature to take action when session resumes in January. Let me see if I can add this to the screen. There we go. So that will give you the two sections of the presser. But this is interesting. But union leaders in the state are at odds over the next appropriate steps. The total assaults on prison staff and incarcerated people are higher than ever. But DOC says about 98% of the incidents reported in the last 3 months resulted in no injuries or minor injuries. But the State Correction Officer Union refutes that, and good reason to refute that, because it's just unbelievable that they downplay, as I just spoke earlier, of the officer that was assaulted, and they came up with that when they labeled that assault as no injury, but yet this officer is never going to work again. So good job refuting that, because I believe the union is dead on and that rebuttal. Recent data shows assaults on prison staff throughout the state have increased by nearly 70% in the last 5 years, hitting an all-time high with 1,760 assaults on staff so far this year and 2,450 incidents on incarcerated people. So again, you see that the all-time high on both inmate on inmate assaults and inmate on staff assaults. It's just disgusting. The State Correction Officers Union has blamed a law that took effect in 2022 that prohibits a person in prison from being held in segregated housing for no longer than 15 consecutive days. Quote, the staff, so to speak, they don't have the tools, essentially, to do the job to be able to help them control the facilities, end quote, said Senator Patrick Gallivan. Union leaders and Republican lawmakers are pushing for the humane alternatives to long-term solitary confinement or HALT Act to be repealed. The law took effect in 2022. Assembly Correction Committee Chair Eric DeLon says the increase in prison violence started years before HALT took effect, and it's too soon to change it. Really? Really, Assemblyman? That's what you're coming up with? It's too soon to change it? So if it was already a problem, you poured gasoline on the fire, but yet you take no recognition of that. But I'll go on. So, quote, they got to make the case that makes sense to do so, end quote, DeLon said. You just can't say, well, assaults are up, and maybe not all of them are serious, so let's repeal HALT, end quote. Now, is that not the most asinine comment that an assemblyman can take? So basically, we've already proved that the assaults are up, so let's not take those that are doing the front line work of it. Let's have them get beat more, and then we'll talk more about HALT. and then I'll get on to his next quote, which also irritates me, but maybe not all of them are serious. So one assault to you, Assemblyman, is okay. Doesn't matter if it's serious or not. We've already proved that the serious assaults are downplayed to sometimes no injuries. So we know that's not true. You gotta be kidding me. So I'll go on. So DeLon says Democrats in the assembly don't have the appetite to repeal, tweak the law, and lawmakers plan to focus on reducing staff overtime mandates, facility updates, and improving educational programs for the people in prison instead. So we're talking about adding more programs, but yet you're saying that you're going to reduce staff overtime and the mandates. How is that possible? Your HALT Act increased the workload, and now you're saying that you've got some problem. So you blame the officers that they don't have a solution, which they do, but now you just make a blanket statement yourself and saying that you're going to reduce staff overtime. But it gets better. DeLon added he plans to grill docs and union leaders about the issue at upcoming budget hearings this winter. So we're going to wait until wintertime as people are getting their heads banged in, and then we may be able to ask some questions. And instead of trying to solve the problems, we're going to grill people and not take any action until then. Absolutely disgusting. And what's here is his quote. Quote, I'm more concerned about the programming that DOCCS has that provides and reforms people who want to reform on the inside and how those services are being delivered, he said. Now, yeah, you're asking to be all programs. There's already more programs than ever. We have program facilities. They're programmed more than ever. The inmates don't want it. The inmates are, like we said before, are even screaming that they want help because they're getting the shit beat out of them. And now we just had inmate deaths litter the news cycle for the last 2 weeks. Wake up. DOCCS told Spectrum News that the department's prison violence task force continues to meet and strategize new methods to stop the violence. This department does not tolerate any assaults, but DOCCS stressed 98% of assaults on staff didn't result in serious injury. Well, Commissioner. It's good that you can take your head out of your ass and say that, one assault is too many. But you downplaying the assaults and these comments do nothing to help the people that are under your supervision. Shame on you. I just can't wrap my head around this commissioner and his comments. He adds insult to injury, just like the assemblyman did. He has no respect for staff, and yet he's held every position that there is. And we'll get into that later with his poll and his nobody has confidence in this commissioner. And after you read these comments, how can you? So leaders with the State Correction Officers Union refute that, arguing they've had members sustain a concussion, fractured elbow, broken nose from incidents with people in the prison in the last 3 months. In a statement, the Correction Officers Union stated in part, according to the New York State penal law, those are felony assaults. They can downplay the numbers all they want, but the reality is staff are under siege on a daily basis without any relief or concrete solutions to address the violence. That's well said, and that's true. I mean, good for the union for coming out. I wish they'd be a little more aggressive in their stance against DOCCS instead of singing kumbaya with the commissioner. But it is a daily basis without any relief. And then you wonder why people can't or won't take the job. The state agency, meanwhile, is calling on the union to have more productive conversations with the leaders. So they're giving you the problems, they're telling you what the solutions are, but yet you want to have more dialogue. So let's have, and this goes from everyone that's involved in this, let's have meetings to have meetings to have meetings. And that's what's disgusting about the bureaucracy of New York. It's like nothing ever gets accomplished. You know what the problems are. You've been delivered messages time and time again, but yet you want to say and hang out and say, let's have a meeting to have a meeting. That to me makes absolutely no sense. In a statement, officials with the department said in part, while NYSDOCCS attends these meetings, it is time that the union participate with ideas that can be developed and implemented to decrease assaults on staff on incarcerated individuals. DeLon said he's spoken with DOCCS Commissioner Marticello since he was appointed last year and says the commissioner has brought up concerns about increased violence in state facilities, but has not asked for the halt to be repealed. Bingo. So if the commissioner isn't taking it and can't see it, why are state legislators? So where is the support for repeal of HART by this commissioner? That says it all right there. It's in black and white, people. You can see it and read it for yourselves. The commissioner has never agreed with repealing HALT. So unless he says it, the legislator is partly right on that, though they should take action because it's they're taking unions' money. They're getting the messages from the union that they want, nothing is being accomplished. But right there in a nutshell, Delon is saying we didn't even hear from the department that there's a problem. Hello, the numbers, they put out a fact sheet every month. The numbers speak for themselves, and we'll get into those numbers in just a moment. So the second part is another disgusting area. This has less to do with physical injury, though officers and civilian staff, all employees, we'll talk about Fishkill Correctional Facility and being in harm's way because of an ORC that delivered a FOIL request to an inmate, two inmates, and released social security numbers of that of all staff involved or all staff employed at the prison. So this one, Fishkill inmates get copies of correction officers' confidential information. And this was reported by the Mid-Hudson News. It was also put out on the many websites. It was also Blaise Gomez, the reporter in the Westchester area. She also put out a press release on this. So, and I also put out the incident on my Facebook groups. But here it is. Fishkill inmates get copies of correction officers' confidential information, November 20th, 2024, released at 6:01 a.m. Fishkill, hundreds of New York State correction officers and prison employees are on high alert and concerned for their safety after their personal information was provided to at least two inmates at the medium security Fishkill Correctional Facility. The multi-page list is said to include the employee's name, job title, and social security number of every staff member. The Fishkill Correctional Facility, NYSDOCCS, the union representative said the Offender Rehabilitation Coordinator, ORC, who provided the inmates with the officer's information, advised the prison superintendent of the breach on Sunday, November 17, 2024. This information, however, was given to the inmates 13 days earlier on November 4, 2024. So for 13 days, this information was disseminated throughout the facilities. And there was an updated press release before I read this further from NYSDOCCS stating that they got everything. The information is floating with 13 days. They even found it trying to be going out in the mail. NYSDOCCS said they recovered that. So how in good conscience can they say with 100% certainty that this information was all kept in-house and they retained all of it? I call bullshit. NYSDOCCS said that the facility has been conducting searches to determine how many copies are in circulation among the nearly 2,000 inmates. The initial two inmates were searched and 2 copies, an additional copy made by an inmate has been recovered. All inmates who made copies of documents in the law library that equal the number of pages, 22, in leaked documents have been searched along with the clerks in the law library. The New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, NYSDOCCS, has indicated that letters will be mailed to every staff member's residence advising them of the data leak. NYSDOCCS and other staff member unions, CSEA, PEF, and Council 82, are all in consultation with their legal advisors to determine what options are available to the affected members. This isn't the first time that this type of incident has happened in a correctional facility. We've had this type of information leaked before. It was stolen by inmates at Gowanda. It was also leaked out in training records. That time, the superintendent, who was Dale Artis, I believe, at the time, was able to work with NYSDOCCS, and they got 1 year of LifeLock for every employee at the facility. But it goes better to a better question. Why is NYSDOCCS still having lists with social security numbers? Because they are so antiquated and behind the times. There's no need to have social security numbers. I know that we used to have to enter social security numbers and short names for UI packets as the watch commander, and that system is so old it makes your head spin. It's just, there's no need to even have that. Nobody should have social security numbers, period, in the facility, let alone print a report, except for payroll. And I just, another thing, then they blatantly give it. So it went from whoever got the information or printed the information to begin with, so they never redacted the information, went from that person. If there was a second person or the ORC printed it themselves, I'm not sure, and I don't want to misspeak or blame the ORC blatantly. But obviously there was no checks and balances as far as, okay, this information, nobody looked at it. And where's your information? The employee that actually gave it to the inmates, where's your information even on that? I don't know. And that puts security in harm's way. It's happened before. I'm not going to get into certain incidences, but we remember the Lakeview. The inmate just died when they did the mail bomb to the package room in Lakeview. We've had officers' homes broken in that they correlated, or at least we believed, allegedly, that it was related to a address leak at a facility. So this puts everybody in harm's way, and to downplay this and say, "Oh, nothing got out," is unacceptable. And the days of especially now when there's no penalty to the inmates on the outside or the inside, dangerous things can happen. And to downplay that, I just can't I can't go along without voicing my frustration. So it brings us on to the next one. As we get into these different law enforcement, we know how wonderful bail reform is, parolees, it's this, and we're going to get into a parolee in a minute who shot a New York City officer. It's just you just wonder what direction is New York going in. It's the governor turns her blind eye to everything that is going on in the correctional system, offers zero help, has made zero press releases, has done zero changes to protect the employees under her. So DOCCS refuses to even acknowledge to the legislator that there's a halt problem, or all they care about is putting out recruiting. And we'll get to that in a second as well. But they're not offering any solutions or doing anything to protect the employees. So what is the answer? We can come up with solutions and send that all day long, but if you don't implement them or acknowledge them, or at least say, yeah, we thought about that, we're just not going to do that. Say something. Something is better than nothing. Like I always say, a bad plan is better than no plan. And we'll get into this one on the news. So the lifetime parolee who shot New York City cop was cut loose by judge despite DA's pleas, multiple arrests. So here we are, another parolee on the loose, thanks to the great parole board and decisions by this governor and New York State bureaucracy. So we'll read this. This was done by the New York Post by Amanda Woods, Jack Morfitt, Joe Morano, and Jorge Fitzgibbon. This was published on November 20th, 2024, released at 5:54 p.m. from the New York Post. The career criminal who killed in a shootout and wounded a hero cop was on the streets because a Queens judge cut him loose 3 months ago, even after prosecutors and his parole officer pushed to lock him up. Gary Worthy, 57, was already on lifetime parole and serving 2 stints in state prison when he went before Queens criminal judge, court judge Edwards Daniels on August 27th on a pair of new criminal cases for assault and burglary. Records revealed by the Post reveal. The Queens District Attorney Office asked that Worthy be held on $120,000 bail based on the nature of the offense and the criminal record of the accused. A spokesperson for DA Melinda Katz said Wednesday. Worthy's parole officer asked that he be held without bail at the same hearing. Gary Worthy, 57, has served 2 stints in state prison but remained free despite being on lifetime parole. Wow. But Daniels instead released Worthy without bail, and he still remained free after he was arrested again last week on drug possession and resisting arrest charges, the records show. Does that not blow your mind? Right there. Already last week he was arrested and he resisted arrest. But yeah, let's let him out. He's not going to hurt anybody. Not. On Tuesday night, the police said a gun-wielding Worthy tried to rob a Jamaica bodega and a smoke shop before he was confronted by cops, wounding one of the officers before being shot dead, wounding one of the officers before being shot dead. So you let him out to create more mayhem, more violence occurred because of poor decisions. You see a pattern there? Not only is it happening in the correctional facilities, but it's mirroring exactly what's happening on the streets. When there are no penalties, no repercussions, there is going to be increased bad behavior. It's showing. The statistics are showing it. DOCCS' own statistics show it. Wake up. He's been arrested numerous times while on parole, one law enforcement source told the Post, but apparently that's not enough to put him back in. If he hadn't died, I'm sure his parole officer would be upset he missed his appointment. We interact with criminals every day, and there is an unspoken comfort in knowing there's someone out there tracking them, holding them accountable. But now after this, as it really shows, we're on our own. Dad. And that's actually what's going on. And it's goes on and on. Wow, you are on your own, and we're on our own inside the prison system as well. No law enforcement is safe at this point. The Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, which oversees the parole system, initiated proceedings to lock Worthy up after he was charged in August. But Daniels ordered an ex-con released, a spokesperson for the agency said in an email on Wednesday. Police said Gary Worthy shot New York PD cop Rich Wong in the thigh before the wounded officer returned fire and killed the ex-con on Tuesday night in Queens. Under the law, the department has 24 hours to issue a warrant to bring a case before a judge, but the spokesperson noted the judge has the sole authority to make the decision whether to reprimand or release on recognizance. According to a transcript of the August 27th court proceedings, Worthy's parole officer said the ex-con had not shown up for a required meeting with him since April, despite occasionally calling in. Didn't that send off an alarm right there? So we don't even follow their own policies, and when they violate it, there's no repercussions. In two of the cases against him, Worthy allegedly pulled knives on his brother and a friend in separate incidents, telling one, "I will kill you and I will shoot you," the transcript shows. In the second case, he warned, "I will cut you and throw you off the balcony." That's not any violence. At one point, both the prosecutor and Worthy's legal aid attorney said he did not have access to a gun. Well, you had access to a knife. I'm glad he didn't have access to a gun. But I digress. The court finds that in the case released does not present a substantial risk of falling to appear to at a preliminary or final parole revocation hearing, and that non-monetary conditions would be the least restrictive means to secure his attendance at that proceedings, the judge said. So he doesn't show up for parole, but he can show up for hearings. Daniels then ordered Worthy released, but was required to call his parole officer the next morning. In an email Wednesday, a spokesperson for the State Office of Court Administration, which oversees the judicial system, said the agency does not comment on bail decisions, except to say that in cases like this, New York judges have discretion, based solely on an individualized assessment of a defendant's risk of flight. Worthy's criminal history dates to 1994, when he was sentenced to 16 years in state prison on a manslaughter conviction after he pled it down from a murder charge. Wow. He was released in 2008, only to be arrested again on a gun charge the following year. He was hit with a prison sentence of 2 to 4 years and was released in 2021 with lifetime parole, records show. Lifetime parole worked, didn't it, folks? He remained on the loose despite 7 more arrests, including 3 pending Queens cases for assault, burglary, and criminal drug possession, the records show. In the most recent cases, he was charged with an assault on April 19th and a burglary on June 7th, the cases that brought him before Daniels in court on August 27th. He was arrested again last week on drug and resisting arrest charges and again released. Security camera footage obtained by the Post captured Worthy's latest alleged crimes on Tuesday. Around 5:30 p.m., he walked into the Village Market and Grill on Hillside Avenue in Jamaica and tried to rob the retailer. The video shows Worthy pulling a gun out of a plastic bag and slamming it on the counter after ordering a $9 serving of rice, beans, and chicken. He told me, "Don't move," store clerk Satur Kar said Wednesday. "I was scared because he didn't ask me for money, nothing. So I was scared he wanted to kill me. I ran away downstairs into the basement," Carr said. "While I was downstairs, we heard a gunshot." She said Worthy fired a shot at the cash register, but wasn't able to get the money inside. He then left the store, hopped on a bike, and pedaled away, the clerk said. That's when Carr called the police. About an hour later, cops said Worthy walked into a small smoke shop on Guy Brewer Boulevard and asked for a pack of cigarettes, then fired a shot at the clerk, Abdullah. He said, "Give me all your money," Abdullah said. "I don't even know how much money I gave him, but I think maybe he wasn't happy with how much it was. He shot at me, one shot, and it went between my legs," he said. "It hit the glass at the front of the store. I said, 'I gave you everything. You can check for yourself.' He said, 'Okay, give me more Newports.' I gave him Newport 100s and Newport shorts, maybe 12 packs. Abdullah said Worthy then told him to get down and left the store. Outside, veteran New York PD cop Rich Wong confronted Worthy, who turned and fired at the officers, striking Wong in the thigh. The wounded cop fired back, striking Worthy in the face and killing him. A 26-year-old bystander was also wounded and is expected to survive. Wong was released from Jamaica Hospital on Wednesday as more than 200 New York PD cops, included from his own 103rd precinct, cheered him on. Outside the hospital, NYPD PBA President Patrick Henry railed against the broken criminal justice system that allowed Worthy to remain free despite his repeated arrest and lifetime parole. Something's got to change, and it needs to change right away, he said. Cops feel that the system doesn't have our backs. Police officers will always have the backs of the people out in the communities. We will always be there for them. We will always take the criminals off the street, but we need this system to back us. Well said. And as we see, could not agree more. Law enforcement right now is in chaos. It's been that way for the last couple of years as we've been to defund the police movement. We've seen what happens as far as the funding the police. You have a recruitment retention problem. The chaos on the street ensues, and that's where we are today. Now you couple that with bail laws, HALT Act, and these other extreme policies, it just makes for bad decisions and people getting hurt and the violence increasing. And hats off to the NYPD that situation didn't end up worse. And we pray that the officer makes a full recovery. And as we get on to these incidents, it doesn't matter if it's in the street or in the prisons, you see how it's mirroring one another. I just, and for people not to say a word, where is the leader of New York State? Where is the change? Or I bet you there'll be changes something now, maybe nothing major, but there'll be, well, we got to do something. So we'll wave a magic wand and say that we put a flag out for the officers, and that's where it'll end until the next incident. Does something have to happen to them in order for change to occur? Maybe. So the next one we get into is the from the Finger Lake Times. Let me put this up on the screen here. If I have that, do we have that? No. Where do we have it? Training seats room. I do not have this one. All right. So this one is the. Let me remove this. I thought I had this here. Violence at Sing Sing. Let me just see if we do have that. And for those that want to follow along, it's a safety now. But anyway, so I'll read this one. This is from the Finger Lake Times, November 20th, 2024. At 6:03 a.m. Officer hospitalized after violent assault at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. A correction officer sustained a broken foot and other injuries after being attacked by an inmate at Sing Sing Correctional Facility on Monday, according to officials. The assault occurred at 10:38 a.m. as inmates returned from morning recreation to their cells. The incident began when the inmate, 32, was yelling in a stairwell and refused orders to return to his cell. When the officer approached to intervene, the inmate punched him, threw him down the stairs, and continued the assault. A second officer attempting to restrain the inmate, but the inmate broke free and lunged again at the injured officers. Additional staff responded, and the inmate was subdued and handcuffed after a struggle. The injured officer was transported to Westchester Medical Center, where he was treated for knee, ankle, and facial injuries, including a broken bone in his left foot. Two other officers sustained wrist, hip, back, and neck injuries during the altercation, but remained on duty after receiving medical attention. The inmate, serving a 2 to 4 year sentence for criminal possession of a weapon, was transferred to Coxsackie Correctional Facility following the attack. He is scheduled for conditional release in 6 months. This attack underscores the dangers faced by correction officers every day, said David Luther, vice president of the NYSDOCCS Southern Region. He urged the Westchester County District Attorney's Office to pursue felony assault charges against the inmate to deter future violence. Prosecution that results in longer sentences for violent inmates is the last line of defense. We have to keep staff safe, Luther said. The assault follows a recent slashing incident at Sing Sing, heightening concerns about staff safety at the maximum security prison. And we see that these incidents are ongoing, and we'll get to the statistics in just a moment. And it gets better as we see that these incidents are ever growing. And I'll touch on the regional recruitment, because obviously the assaults correlate why nobody wants the job and why people are leaving. That and coupled with the poor policy decisions of DOCCS. But now DOCCS has come out with this regional hiring, which I guess is improving. They have direct placement at Marcy, Midstate, Mohawk, Cayuga, Auburn, 5 Points. Then they added Bear Hill, Elmira, Fishkill, Franklin, Greenhaven, and Upstate. And just now, recently, they just added Clinton, Ulster counties to this regional hiring. So I hope for their sake, they're able to pick up. But you can see by the list that I just rattled off, you're looking at over half the correctional facilities that are having a problem. So when people are running for the door, and these incidents are being brought forth in attention as they should be, who is going to want a job where the assaults are crazy, you have no home life, and the department doesn't have your back, as the officer that resigned that I started the podcast off with, so eloquently said. It all correlates. And then the finger pointing club comes out, and let's blame everybody but the people that started this process to begin with. And how the department and the commissioner get away when he held a director or personnel position. You don't get a pass. Sorry. You held that position. So we'll get into the different positions in a minute. So this is the last one on the news cycle. So this one is just released this morning. This came out, Elmira Correctional Facility inmate attempts to get officer's handgun. Incident occurred in emergency room at local hospital, November 21st, 2024 at Elmira, New York. An inmate serving his second stint in prison in 5 years attempted to grab an officer's gun inside the emergency room at a local hospital, injuring a sergeant and 2 officers who had to subdue him before he was able to remove the handgun from the officer's holster. So it wasn't, luckily, I had to reread that, making sure that he did not retrieve the handgun, luckily. On Friday, October 25th, the inmate was transported to Arnott Ogden Medical Center for treatment. After treatment at the emergency room, 2 officers approached the inmate to apply restraints for the trip back to the Elmira Correctional Facility. The inmate suddenly grabbed one of the officer's handgun and attempted to remove it from the holster while shoving the second officer away. Both officers quickly placed the inmate in a body hold and forced him to down onto the emergency room bed. This happened in the emergency room in the hospital. Understood. The inmate continued to struggle with the 2 officers as he applied handcuffs. After the incident was contained, the inmate was transferred back to the facility. When they arrived at the facility, the inmate refused orders to exit the van. Staff used body holds to force the inmate out of the van and carry him to the infirmary as he continued to struggle and fight with them. Once in the infirmary, the inmate became compliant. The 2 injured officers sustained neck, shoulder, and back injuries. They were treated by medical staff at the facility. The inmate, 28, is serving a 4-year sentence after being convicted for assault second in Clinton County in 2024. Previously, he was sent to prison in 2019 for disseminating indecent materials to a minor in the first degree. In addition to that incident, staff recovered a makeshift weapon used in an inmate attack inside the recreation field house on Sunday, November 17th. During morning recreation, staff observed a large group of inmates congregating near the picnic tables. Officers observed 4 inmates fighting each other. Several orders were given to stop, but were ignored. As the fight escalated, chemical agents were introduced into the field house. The chemical agents had a desired effect, and the inmates stopped fighting. The inmates were removed from the field house and decontaminated. 1 inmate was treated for laceration consistent with a cutting-style weapon. After the field house was cleared, staff conducted a search of the field house and recovered a sharpened black ice pick type weapon from the floor. We are very fortunate that the 2 officers in the hospital acted quickly and stopped the inmate from gaining access to the officer's handgun. A situation like that can escalate quickly and puts not only the officers in danger, but the medical staff and civilian patients in the emergency room as well. Yet members of the legislature, like Eric Delon, don't believe it's soon enough to make changes to the HALT Act, which takes all repercussions away for bad behavior. As you can see at Elmira, the inmates are not only attacking officers, the inmate violence is at an all-time high as well. This is a prime example of no fear from a boldened criminal that would have devastated a community had these officers not been vigilant. Couple that with mandatory overtime, short staffing, and historic levels of violence in our prison, it is no wonder why members are retiring or resigning in droves. They feel underappreciated and overlooked by our elected officials who continue to coddle and advocate for inmate rights, yet ignore the very men and women who protect them, stated Kenny Gold, the Western Region Vice President. And we just almost said that word for word. So kudos to Mr. Gold. And those are two separate instances on that press that release that I just read to you. And we see a very more emboldened inmate. They're emboldened on the street as well. This incident had it in a local hospital in the emergency room, could have very escalated into something else. So there's all kinds of violence that are happening, and people need to pay attention. And the comments that are coming out from the legislators and this commissioner just underscores that there's no respect for law enforcement. There's no respect for the officers that are doing the hard work and that are having to put up with these poor policy decisions. So again, my hats are off to the correction officers that do the role, the supervisors that have to endure these policies and the lack of respect from this agency and the legislator and this governor. All right, that ends the news cycle. So until we get into the next week, we'll have more. But I did want to follow up on the body-worn cameras. We had a poll last week about the use of body-worn cameras. I received a lot of feedback, a lot of emails, a lot of messages, a lot of text messages regarding the body-worn cameras and the more. We touched on that last podcast, but I'll touch on it again because there's incidences where the cameras are used against the officers, and that is becoming ever more prevalent from the messages that I just received following last week's podcast. And they're basically, the biggest complaint is that they're used more for officers' discipline or officer being accused of wrongdoing than they are for the incident themselves. After the polling and the podcast, many reached out and said that they were in trouble for not even turning on the camera during an incident where officers were defending themselves and did not think to turn on the camera first as they were protecting themselves. In one instance, the officer was being assaulted into the inmate by the inmate. So if your first action is automatically to defend yourself, my first action isn't to hit a button, record, take a couple of assaults, and then protect myself. So if that is true and that's what the department is doing, that's absolutely disgusting. Other incidents about the cameras, as we touched on it last podcast, is that every agency that's out there, and even the agencies here, when I talk to the law enforcement here in Florida, is they help write the report for the incident. They don't tell you to mind warp it first, and then we'll criticize and critique on your camera second. It doesn't work that way. Adrenaline's flowing, you miss facts, and not to harp on last week's podcast, but that was one of the biggest concerns, is that be able to use these body-worn cameras to help write reports, and that is true. And we all know that when DOCCS puts in the cameras, whether it be static cameras or body-worn cameras, it's never officer friendly. And the other part that came out that I received a lot of messages on were that the incidents that did happen or misbehavior reports were written, what have you, that those incidents were thrown out where the body-worn camera was not activated. And if that's the case, and that's actually truth to fact, then that's also disgusting by the department. So we'll get on to the poll. So the first poll that it came out this week was about the stab-proof vest. So we had 3 polls that I wanted to get in, if I have discussion on. The first poll here was from 11/17. We ended that this morning on 11/21. The poll was about stab-proof vest. And that, like I said, closed this morning at 9 a.m. The question was, would you support wearing and being issued a stab-proof vest if DOCCS mandated it to be worn daily by everyone. And the reason I received a lot of feedback as far as making it optional, but I worded it this way on purpose. Now, I can't speak to what the union or different entities that are having the are talking with the departments as far as equipment or product development. But years ago, when we did have the product development meetings, when I attended one of them, they said that as far as whether it be bulletproof vest or stab proof vest or what have you, that they were going to do it for everyone that was in a post with inmate contact, that everyone, it wasn't going to be optional, it was mandatory. So that's why this poll was worded the way that it was. And as you can see, that it was about 50-50. You had 221 that were in favor of, yes, I support being issued this vest and mandatory wear as part of the uniform. And then you had another 50%, 227 responses saying, no, I do not support being issued this vest and mandatory wear as part of the uniform. But if you were to change that, so it's 50-50. If you were to change that and being optional, this would have been more like 90 or even higher, because a lot of the comments, a lot of the messages were all just that they wanted the vest, but they wanted it to be optional wear. You had, the same things. It's bulky. It's not. There's different product developments, vests that are out there. Having worn one before, I know that you can get lighter weight, less cumbersome vest. People were saying that it's already 100 degrees in the summertime. Now you're going to make me wear this. So I appreciate all the comments. Like I said, everyone, I think, was higher favorability to those. If it would have been overwhelmingly response to yes, if it was for optional wear. So the next poll was on the nepotism. This gets into the thing that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, as far as the payroll that we recently were able to see through seethroughnewyork.net. I posted it here. I'll post it again in a minute. And that's a poll getting into the salary of the people with the last name Marticello. Not all work for DOCCS, obviously. And we can see that the question was, do you believe the commissioner has been favored and gained his many positions in DOCCS and helped his family through nepotism? So do you think that the commissioner gained his way? Did he earn it? Was there nepotism involved? And as we see, just about every department has the last name of Marticello in it. And I'll put that up real quick. As you can see through the See-Through New York that was foiled, that you see it for the pay year of 2023. Obviously, the payrolls will be higher as they come out next year, but you can see there's quite a few names within the Department of Corrections with the last name of Marticello, and those that work and know, as you can see, know that a lot of those are in leadership positions within the agency. How that's allowed and how that continues, I just don't understand that. But getting back to the poll for the nepotism, you can see that there was 223 responses. And 220 of those responses all said, yes, the commissioner and his family members have greatly benefited from nepotism. So that gives you a 98%. And then 3 responses said, no, the commissioner and his family have worked hard for their positions. There is no nepotism. And that gives you, out of those 3 responses, out of the 223, so you got 2% there. So I won't harp on that. We touched that at last podcast, but you can see there's not a whole lot of love for the commissioner. And how can it be when everybody see that, the name itself is you can be as incompetent as you can be, but the name itself is what gives you the position. And that's sad, very sad to see. So let's go on to the last poll that we had. Well, like I said, we had 3 for this week of November 17th, and we move on to poll 3. And that was the training. And this is a follow-up because training we touched on last podcast. And I was just shocked at how this training question keeps coming up. It just keeps up over and over. And I was not expecting training to be a bone of contention within the employees, especially security staff. And the last poll this is a follow-up on a previous survey. As you know, training came up at the top of the list, which I was shocked in that survey. The question is, are you satisfied with the level of training and professional development opportunities available to you in DOCCS? And there was 3%, 9 responses that said, yes, I'm satisfied with the training. And then there's 244 responses. Over 97% said, no, I am not satisfied. So training still seems to be a bone of contention. And I've heard everything from the academy to in-service training. A lot of complaints about the people that are coming out of the academy. I won't get into certain aspects as people were, I'm just baffled as far as what they're saying is some of the stuff. If EIU is allowing certain people to take this job that have prior problems that with gangs and what have you, then that's a separate issue. But getting on to the training, it was both in-service training and academy training that they wanted people to, or wanted to, and for career advancement as well. And we all know that if anybody that's been through the ranks know that, yeah, there is no training for sergeant. You can go to sergeant school most of the time. It was well after the fact. Recently, the last 5 years, I believe, or a little more. It's a little more. It was before I retired. They started doing sergeant school and lieutenant school while you were on the active list. But the training for that, it's even that it needs to be improved in my opinion. There's many ways to improve that, but again, training being a very topic, a bone of contention, very hot topic. People want to see the training improved, and not just, we're not talking problems with the trainers, we're talking problems with the curriculum and what is actually being taught. As the last survey said, people wanted to be taught mostly for disciplinary reasons of cell extractions and what have you. And I have always been a proponent of doing mock cell extractions so you can do it and learn from the mistakes on a practice, as opposed to making those mistakes in live service, which everybody makes mistakes, and we want to minimize that. So if you're not practicing that, that's another issue in itself. So that's the end of the polls. So you have the 3 polls that we got with the different the nepotism, the training, and the stab-proof vest. So that gives you a little better. We're going to come out with a poll this week. Someone had sent to me. We'll probably put that out to either today or tomorrow. That gets into the Narcan as far as officers being supplied and carrying if they choose Narcan on their person. So we'll do a poll on that. I'm just going to think of how I'm going to word that. And we get on to lastly, just before we close out, the assault updates. So just in the last week for inmate on inmate assaults, we've gone up 2450, I believe was what I said at the last podcast. And we're up to 2529. Obviously, the incidents in the last couple of days, we've surpassed that. So incidents, new record at 2,529. That's up 79 instances in a week. And then we have the inmate on staff. That's up 42 in a week. We're at 1865, and that's up from 1823. So as you can see, new records are being broken, and those records are not good records. People are getting injured. People are not coming back to work. People are getting maimed and injured that will never work again. And it's got to stop. The problems that permeate because of the way the system is currently being run, the policies that are being introduced, and the policies that are being shoved down every officer's throat, I think have been brought to the forefront for at least the last 2 years. We've been discussing it, at least I know others have, for many, many years. But the last 2 years has been heavy prevalent since the HALT Act has passed, and it's falling on deaf ears. Can't say that enough. And then you wonder why employee morale is so low. The incidents keep rising. People are getting hurt. Nothing is being done. Nothing's being done by the department. Nothing's being done by the New York State elected representatives as a collective. There are certain individuals that have tried and spoken at rallies about the things that they would like to see changed and ways to go about that. You've seen different local administrations also, when I say local, meaning county jails, talking about how the HALT Act has changed. So people that are saying that they don't know just are not paying attention. They don't want to know. And then when you have a commissioner again to relay to the legislator, or the legislator relaying, I should say, about the commissioner, we never heard it that he wants to repeal the HALT Act. I mean, that we used to have commissioners that had back. I touched on that last episode where the commissioner would say, you're not touching my facility. If you lose it, that's on you. But I'm not in favor, and I'm not doing it. And we've lost that. And basically, this commissioner is way out of touch. Cares more about his personal gain and his last name than he does about protecting those that are under him. And that is a problem in itself. And you can see the problem exacerbating and not being brought down to a level that's tolerated. Words do not mean action. Words are simply that, words. It's time for action. And it's time for action by not just the commissioner, by the governor and the legislative body as a whole. It's like the issues have been brought to your attention. You choose to ignore. You choose to bury your head in the sand, and pretend like all this is not happening. And sooner or later, someone is going to die. We have already seen inmates die. We've seen inmates homicides in the last couple of weeks. Talked on that last podcast. Is an officer, a civilian, is someone else going to die because of these bad policies? I bet you. I don't want to see it. I'm not praying for it. And again, I'm praying for all the officers and people that go to work every day, employees, all employees that go to the prisons and jails every day, and all law enforcement and whole, to put on the uniform to protect the public and want to make a difference and want to go home the same way that they came in. So again, I pray for all of you. Your safety is the utmost importance, and that's what most of these podcasts are, to bring awareness and attention to the situation as far as violence inside the prisons, the assaults that are going on, to assault on staff, assault on inmates, and the mandatory overtime, the mandatory loss of the home life balance, and to bring these law enforcement issues to the public with the hope that somebody will pay attention and hope that they listen. And as we also want to respect each other and remember to treat the person next to you kind, as you may not know what that person is going through. And with the mental health cries that have been going out because of the conditions that everyone's been working in, we're seeing more and more of that. So let's be kind, everyone. And with that, I thank you. And I can't thank you enough for supporting the Working in Hell podcast. So thank you, everyone. And we'll see you again next week.
You've been listening to the Working in Hell podcast with Vinny Blasio. Find this podcast on any of your favorite platforms like Audible, iHeart, and Spotify. And be sure to check out www.workinginhell.com for more information and important links. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.